Welcome. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. It's Saturday morning in a time of craziness. So thanks for being here. Really do appreciate it. So we'll hopefully have some fun and we talk about it. But we're going to talk about Composer today and a few other topics around Composer. Hi, I'm Shane McKinney. You may know me from Stanford Web Services. I'm the technology lead, been with them for a while. I'm situated in Squamish, BC, and I've been full-time remote for about 6 years. With Stanford Web Services. So this is a lot of fun. So I like to talk fast, I mumble, I have Canadianisms. So absolutely at any point, go ahead, put stuff into the chat, put your hand up. We've got several moderators here, I can help. So this is a presentation, but it's also online format, so it's also a conversation. So have at it, we can have some fun. With us today, we have also Ian Monroe. Ian, want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Ian, as Shay mentioned, and I am located in, well, somewhat snowy Denver, Colorado today. I am a newcomer to Stanford Web Services, having only been on since about the first of the year. But thanks for having me today.
Great. Okay, well, let's start off right from the beginning. So what is Composer? So Composer is a tool to handle dependency management. And I highlighted dependency management because that's a really important topic when we start talking about projects that are of any sort of degree in size, or just even we want to start to reuse and share stuff. So it is really, really important topic, and we'll talk about a whole bunch today. But Composer is a de facto tool for PHP projects. So you want to start to use that if you're not. It can handle non-PHP dependencies too, so it is there to handle your PHP libraries, but you can also do things like JavaScript and CSS and stuff. We'll get into that. And it's command line primarily, but there are GUIs out there. So if you're familiar with Git, you kind of have both worlds. You can kind of go and toss between the two. Same idea with Composer. And you may already be using a dependency management tool, but you don't know it if you've ever used Yarn, NPM, Bower, pip for those guys in Python, dep, nugget, RubyGem, and others. Most modern languages today have some sort of dependency management tool. They generally consolidate on one or two. JavaScript seems to be a little different. They tend to like to do their own thing because they're kind of like that, but it's really important to get to know these things. So Composer is the PHP one, and it's great. So I told this quote, but I'm just going to read it to you because that's what I like to do in the mornings and Saturdays. So Composer is essentially a way to pull in all of the third-party software, such as PHP, CSS frameworks, jQuery plugins, and everything into your project in an organized and repeatable way. So you're thinking, okay, well, I already do that. I just go download stuff. I drop it in my project. It's fine. It's there. I do this all the time. I got this nice little ball of code that I use all the time. I'm comfortable with it. So why do I need dependency management? Well, because things can get tough. Composer really standardizes and automates the retrieval of all of your dependencies in a project. And that's really important because as things grow, or as maybe dependencies have other dependencies, and those dependencies have other dependencies, and then one of them has a security hole, and then you've got to update them. Now you got to figure out which ones work with which ones, because this one depends on this version, and that one wants this guy, but he also depends on that one, and you've got to read the README, and you're trying to go through there and trying to figure out, okay, well, if this guy is on 5.2, but this one wants 5.6, are they the same thing? And you get to a point where you're done, and you don't want to deal with it anymore. You go join this guy in the break room, and then so. You need Composer because it really, really takes care of all of that for you. It is a way, it allows you to declare all of the things that your project needs in one place. We'll talk about that in a bit. Finds out which versions of which packages need to be installed and does it for you. And it can update everything in one command. Like it's just like Composer update, go figure all that stuff out. I don't want to do that. That's not what I get paid for. I get paid to make good stuff. I don't get paid to read READMEs and figure out versions of things. And it handles auto-loading, which is also something that's not fun to do to yourself. So, if you ever read a SPL autoloader, you don't have to do that. Don't do that. It'll do it for you. So this will make you faster. You can have all the things you ever wanted. It's real. Like we get in these tools today as modern developers, like use them. So how does Composer know though, like all of these packages, like where do they all come from? where do we get it from? Well, not really magic. There's a place called packages.org. So that's the main repository that holds all of the things that that you may want to use. So let's take a quick look at what packages.org looks like. So it's a website. It's a repository in the sky or in the cloud, I guess these days. But it is a place where you can go and you can browse and search for things. So say you want a Twitter package, because somebody's written that for you, and there are a lot of smart people out there, and they like to share the code, and it's free. It's open source. Like, that's for those that get paid by the keystroke. That's like free money right there. You don't have to punch those keys. So you want to do this. So if you say you want, I don't know, I can pull in Twitter Bootstrap and click into here and I can find some stuff. So you go to package.org, it has a ton of information. So it's what it is, it gives you the idea of how you can include something in your project, gives you links to where it's hosted, because most of the stuff is hosted somewhere else, like on GitHub or GitLab or something, but it's pulled in and aggregated it to packages. It's got all the versions and you can find out information about it. It's got some wonderful stuff in here. All right. So I can have a look. It's not the only package repository out there. GitHub is actually going to be doing its own thing at some point, or has already. Drupal.org, because Drupal's special, they like to have their own version. Semantics, they've got their own repositories, and there's some more out there. So keep in mind, there's some other things. So versions are really important, because if you want to automate and systemize something, you've got to have sort of convention. So SemVer, what is SemVer? So semantic versioning is a convention that Composer relies on in order to determine or give meaning to the packages of things that work with one another. So as you declare your dependencies and you push out releases of your code, you can give them versions of things. So you can, like, this is version 1, version 2. Well, that's nice. And then you see some things like version 1.1 and 1.2. What does that mean? And then 1.3.4. And then you see all these like Firefox builds that have like 19 different decimal points, and it's kind of weird, but they have meaning. And that's really important, because when you give something meaning, you can also give it convention and trust. So semantic version has a convention of 3 digits, 4 internally, and then you get a couple of extra flavors of things like alpha, beta, release candidate, stuff like that, dev. But the major convention is the 3 digits, which is major version, minor version, and patch version. And the semantic versioning document tells you what those things mean. What does a patch version increment mean? What does a minor patch or minor version increment mean? And that allows you to make good choices in your project to choose things that work for you. So if it's just a little tiny change, you increment by the patch version. If it's a bigger change and maybe you have to do something, but probably will be compatible with the last version, it's a minor version. If you broke everything and rewrote it from scratch, that's a major version, because you're going to have to take action on those types of changes. So this really gives you an idea as a consumer of versions of what is happening in that work. So you don't have to go and read line by line of everything that changed. So I encourage you to read this a whole bunch. We'll talk about it today a little bit more. So to reflect, we have something like 2.5.13. That's your major version, your minor version, and your patch version. Okay, so you've got your Composer project. Ian's going to go through a live demo. He's going to talk about it today. But so you've got this packages server in the sky. You've got your thing, and you've got semantic versioning. But how does Composer know which version of that thing you want? Well, you give it something called a version constraint. So when you're defining in your project your dependencies and you want to use something, you have to know sort of what range of code that remote package is useful for you, or what compatible with your project is. And you can give it these different conventions, and we'll talk about these a little bit more later too. But the version constraints is an archaic-based bunch of syntax that declares whether or not you can include something. Some of it's simple, like if I want to include something like, oops, go back, I can't click on that. Something like all packages that are greater than 2.1.0. So this will increment up. I can do that. I can say every time I run an update or include something in Composer, I can say I want all the packages that get to 2.2, or everything that's similar to 3.2, but don't go to 4. Don't jump up to version 4 on me, because I'm going to have to do something in my project to fix that. Or you can wildcard everything at 2.3. There's a whole bunch of version constraints out there. Really gives you a lot of very fine-grained control over what you can specify in your projects as far as versions of things. You can do ranges of stuff. You can do greater than, equal to, or between. You can do stuff like you can do, I want the dev version, or I want only stable versions. So there's a lot to read in here. I'm not going to get into this part today, but Composer really relies on these conventions and these semantics in order to determine and resolve the packages that you want to pull into your project. So these are really important. So if you're going to be using Composer, you're going to have to know a little bit about semantic versioning, and you have to know a little bit about stability constraints. Working there. So at the end of the day, you get something that kind of looks like this in your project. You get a little this require section. This is in your composer.json. Ian's going to go through that in detail in a second. But you get a bunch of different ranges for different things. So in my project, I want to include, you need to have PHP 7.1 or greater in this project, or it just won't work. So I can define that. I need the spec tool that's greater than or equal to version 2. I've got this custom installer package that is only in an alpha version, so I can include that right now. But Drush is stable, so I can get version 9.7 and a bunch of other things. And then for our work, I'm going to pull in the dev branch of something. So there's that. So you get kind of look at that. But enough with the rambling and enough with the boring stuff, computer sciencey stuff. Let's go demo time. I'm going to pass this over to Ian. So, I'm going to stop the share, and you can pick up and get into the good stuff. Feel free to post questions in the chat as you go. We'll try to field them, but we are going to be a little test for time, so we'll carry on.
All right, so I'm going to show you guys very simply how we can work with Composer. And so what you're looking at here is a Visual Studio Code window, and you'll notice that I have a terminal down here at the bottom that is running in Bash. And like all good demos, this one starts with an empty directory. So before we can start working with anything, we need something to work with. So why don't we just create a simple little file here. And this is just a little Bash script that'll create the file and spit a little bit of PHP into it. So now we've got an index.php file to work with, and we can run it from the command line just by saying php index.php, and you can see that it says hello world. Not particularly awesome yet, so let's give it a little bit more of something to do. Let's take this program here and we'll just flesh it out a little bit more. So this PHP program now will get a timestamp, and it will show you the Unix timestamp, and it will print it out at the bottom. And if we run this program again, you will see that's exactly what it does. It spits out the demo program line, it gets a timestamp, and then it tells you what the timestamp is. So before we go any farther, this is a really good time to initialize a Git repo in our directory so that we can keep track of what we're doing. I will also be adding this code to GitHub at the end of our demo, and we'll be able to share that. Everybody who wants to can take a look at it. Now, I want my computer program or my PHP program to do something a little bit more interesting than this, but I am a lazy, lazy man. So I want to use software that has already been written to do the work for me. So in order to do that, I'm going to use Composer in order to pull in some additional software. So the first thing that we've got to do is initialize Composer in the directory, and we do that with composer init. And we'll just follow through these prompts and let it generate a composer.json for a file for us. So I happen to know that I want this to be called iMonroe, and I'm going to call it composer demo.
Hey, Ian, sorry to interrupt. Are you able to make that window, make the text any bigger in your Visual Studio?
I sure am. Absolutely. Let me see here.
I'm advocating for all the old people here.
Is that a little bit better for you?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
All right. So we're stepping through this bash prompt here. The description is demo. The author is me. Minimum stability, we'll say dev. That's fine. This is going to be a project. Now this is an interesting question. So the difference between a library and a project, which are primarily the two main kinds of Composer JSON files. A library is designed to be included in other pieces of software. A project is designed to sort of stand on its own and to be installable on its own. A project can pull in libraries, and libraries can pull in other libraries, but you'll rarely find a library that pulls in a package. So we're just going to make, I'm sorry, a library that pulls in a project. So we're just going to make this one a project. We don't care about the license. We don't want to do this interactively. And so then it gives us a sample composer.json and it generates it for us. And now we can look at this in our window here. And you'll see that it's just got the very bare bones of a JSON file to get us started. Now, I happen to have a library that contains some functions that I would like to use. And so first of all, let's, do you want your vendor directory added to Git Ignore? Actually, yes, let's say yes to that. You'll notice that we created a Git Ignore file, and so now the vendor directory is added to the Git Ignore so that the vendor directory will not be included when we push this stuff up to GitHub later on. I've got a package that will help me turn timestamps into something a little bit more readable. So I'm going to pull that into my project by using composer require. And it happens to be that my library is called iMonroe/Anna. So I'm going to pull that in via composer. And what you'll see happen is that composer will go out and find the repo at Packagist and pull the code in and create a vendor directory in which to place it. Now, hopefully this won't take too long to run. And you'll notice that it is updating any dependencies. I'll tell you straightforward that my package here does not require any dependencies, so this is going to be a relatively quick thing. It installs the dev master branch because my minimum stability was dev. And it generates an autoload file, which is now in the vendor directory. And you'll notice that the vendor directory has been created and it's got my library in it, and it's got a composer directory in it with some helper files that composer uses. And now we've got a composer.json file and a composer.lock file. Now this is an interesting thing because composer.lock, if you look at it, you'll notice that it's a pretty complicated package or a pretty complicated file that's got hashes of where it's gotten its dependencies from and what relies on what. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but just to make you aware that it exists at this point. If we look at the composer.json file, you'll see that it now includes one requirement, which is 1.0 @dev. Now I'm going to change that to just 1.0 or above, and I'll do a composer update, and it's actually not going to change anything because it's already pulled that version in, but it will make it so that it's using the stable version rather than the master branch of my repo. And it will update the composer file or the composer.lock file in order to reflect that change. Now, since I've got my package included in the composer.json, I can use it in the software that I have already got started here in my index.php file. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is include the autoloader. I pointed that file out a moment ago, and we're just going to include that as the top line of our program here. And this just basically says, look in the directory that we're at, find the vendor directory, and get me autoload.php, which is this file here. So that will make sure that all of our dependencies get loaded correctly. Now, if I want to use my library, I can just import it like so. And now I can do interesting things with it. So I've already got my Unix timestamp. I'll use my Anna library to convert it, to take that timestamp and convert it into a couple more human readable dates. So I've got one that will convert it to an SQL friendly date time, and another one that will convert it to a Google friendly date time. And now if I run my program again, you'll see that it generates the timestamp and both of the formatted timestamps correctly. So great, right? Now, what if we want to auto-load our own classes? So the first thing that we're going to want to do is create another file. And I've got a little bash script that'll do this for us real quick. And so you'll see what that did is it created us a source directory, including a library.php file. Right now that file is empty. What we're going to do is we're going to use this library file to hold additional functions that we can use in our index software. So I'm just going to put a really quick class in here, like so. And all this has is it's a class called library, and it's got one function in it that says say hello with an optional name parameter. And now if I want to use this in my index file, what I'll do is I'll come in here and I'll say use my iMonroe Composer demo library. You'll notice that that is the namespaced name of my library class, right? And just to be on the safe side, I'm going to put a slash there so that we know that we're at the root of the namespaces. And then in my index program here, I can add a couple more lines where I instantiate a library and I tell it to say hello. And if I run my program again, you'll notice it has generated an error. Uncaught error, the class library is not found. Now, the reason that the class library is not found is because we have not told Composer about our source directory where the library file lives. So we're going to edit our composer.json, and we're going to add what's called PSR for auto-loading. So after our require statement here, we'll just paste in this bit. And what this says is, go ahead and auto-load PSR-friendly classes in this namespace. The namespace here is iMonroe/Composer demo. The extra slashes there are to escape those backslashes. And you'll find those classes in the source directory, which is exactly where we put it. Now, if I run Composer update, what will happen is it doesn't have any new dependencies to pull in, but it does know that I've got this source directory here, and so it will load the classes there and make them available via the autoloader. And then if I go back, well, we'll let this finish. Now it has generated the autoload file, and so now if I run my index PHP again, you'll notice that it says hello. And if I give it a string, it's all one word, isn't it? And I run my program again, sure enough, hello webcam. Okay, so we've got a little bit of something fun going on here, but let's pull in some additional software. So let's say I want to check on the status of the Google homepage. Now, I can clearly do that by writing a curl command that will do the thing and respond and get a response out of it. But there's a much easier way. There is a friendly PHP package called Guzzle that we can use to do the actual going out and checking the website and returning us a response. So it's called Guzzle, http/Guzzle. So we're going to tell Composer that we want to use that. It will go out. Guzzle, you'll be able to find that on Packagist, as Shay was pointing out to you earlier, along with a zillion other PHP libraries that you can use. Guzzle is going to do all of the hard work for us. So what we're going to do is edit our library file here. And what we're going to do is, as it is updating its dependencies there, we're going to say, we're going to edit this file, and we're going to say use Guzzle HTTP client, and then we're going to put in an additional function that will check Google for us. And we'll put that in right here. Now, basically what this does is it says we're going to use the Guzzle HTTP client, and we're going to instantiate that as client, and then we're going to tell that client to go and get google.com, and then we're going to return the status code of the response. You'll notice that it is still continuing to pull in Guzzle here, along with the dependencies that Guzzle has. My apologies for this going so slow. That is a problem that is caused by Windows doing a bunch of anti-malware stuff in the background, and I forgot to exclude this directory.
We can stall for it. We got a question in the chat. From
okay,
Carol.
sure, yeah. Let's have a question from the chat.
Yeah, this is a good one to kind of talk through. So Carol is asking about what is the importance of auto-loading?
So auto-loading is important because you don't want to have a whole bunch of include lines at the top of each PHP program that you're working on, right? Instead of saying, include Guzzle, include this, include that. This is where to find them. This is where you are in relationship to the directory that it's stored in. The autoloader takes care of all of that for you, and it makes sure that there's no collisions in namespaces, right? So if you've got two packages that are named the same thing, Composer Autoloader will yell at you, right? And also it means that you don't have to go through and tell it every time that you add a new file. By telling it in the auto-loading function here to include the source directory, that means that all of the files that are in the source directory will be included by default, at least those that have classes in them. Obviously, that doesn't apply to things like README files and htaccess files and so forth. Okay, so we have gotten our Guzzle library in there, and in the library that we are writing, we've got our check. So now all we've got to do is go back into index and put in some way of instantiating that. And we'll just add those lines right here. So what this does is it goes out and it checks Google by calling this function in our library, and it tells us what the status code will be. And if we run the program now, you'll see it says I just checked Google and the response code is 200, which is a relief, because if it had come back with a 404, I would have been really concerned. Now, I'd like to point out that we are calling from our index file, we are calling our library, which we instantiated here. Our library is calling Guzzle, and Guzzle is doing all of the work for us. So that's, you know, that's a pretty neat thing. Now, like any good developer, I am going to eventually want my coworkers to review my code. But Shay here, he's a real stickler for sticking to the correct PHP style guidelines. So I'm going to want to lint my code before I pass it along to him. So for that, we can use a tool called PHP Code Sniffer, which checks our code for style errors and corrects those problems automatically. And once again, we can include that by including it with Composer. So you'll notice that this line is a little bit different. I'm saying Composer require Squizlabs PHP Code Sniffer. That's the name of the package. But I'm also giving it this --dev flag. Now what that means is that Composer is going to treat this as a dev dependency and not as a requirement for the regular software. The difference between a dev dependency and a package that you would include in your production software is that the dev dependency, you don't want to have it. Oh, well, what just happened there? You know what? I am going to change my minimum stability here. In fact, I'm going to take out this line altogether, and I'm going to tell it that it wants to have our real stuff. Let's try that one more time.
Did we find out that packages is down?
Yeah, that would be awesome, wouldn't it? I think it found it.
Can you explain what happened there?
Yes, because I had the minimum requirement as dev, it was going to go out and try to find the latest commit on the dev branch of PHP Code Sniffer, but it could not find that. So instead of trying to get the last commit on the dev branch, we're just telling it to go ahead and grab us the latest stable version. And it has no problem finding that at all, as you can see. You'll notice that it is adding the library here. Well, actually, that's one of the dependencies. As it's building this stuff, you'll be able to see that it sort of fills out the vendor directory. Now, I'm sorry, Carol's got a question. Go ahead, Carol.
Oh, so you had that. What did you remove in your composer.json to make it? Is that?
There was a line in there that said that the minimum dependency should be set, or the minimum stability should be set to dev, and I just removed that minimum stability line because by default it will prefer the stable version rather than the dev version.
So what if you want the dev version for some and stable for the rest?
You can absolutely do that by specifying your version constraints. Like, so for instance here,
okay,
we have the dev version of Guzzle HTTP, which uses the semantic versioning notation that Shay was talking about a little while ago. Does that make sense?
So you have a dev, so you had the dev for all of in general, that's all you want is the dev version, and then otherwise you specify it more closely?
Actually, so the reverse is true. Generally, you want the production versions, the latest stable versions, and you'll want to specify which things that you'll want to use dev versions of, because the dev versions are inherently unstable. Does that make sense?
Right. So why did you have the dev in there in the first place? I'm just trying to understand what happened with that.
Because it prompted me for that when I was running through the Composer init, and I just gave it that for fun.
Okay, that helps. Thank you.
Sure,
it's good practice to stay on the stable releases of things. I would highly recommend it. That's, you know, in the real world, you'll be in a mix of stable and dev and alphas and stuff like that. But where you can, it is the recommended practice to stay on stable releases.
Right. Now you'll notice that the required dev has added Code Sniffer as a dev dependency. Now this is a little bit different from what we were just talking about, right? Because what we were talking about before was the stability of individual packages. What we're talking about with this required dev key here is packages that you only want installed as part of your when you are in a development environment. You don't need those packages for your production environment. In this case, this Code Sniffer package, we as developers want to be able to use it in order to format our source code more appealingly, right? But we don't necessarily need that package to be available in production, because ideally nobody's ever looking at your source code in production, right? So we now have this installed, and we can run it easily enough just by calling it from our vendor directory. You'll notice that we've got this bin directory, and if you open that up, you'll see that, well, Oh, it's not showing me because I'm on Windows and it doesn't like symlinks. Okay, so if I try this, it will run the PHP Code Sniffer, and it will tell me that my index file has some problems in it, okay? Now that's fine, but who wants to remember this syntax every time that you want to run Code Sniffer against any particular software or against any particular PHP script? So there's another thing that we can do in order to make this even easier to use, and that's to use Composer to give us shortcuts to these scripts to run them exactly how we want to do. So we're going to add a little bit more to our composer.json file here. You'll notice that I added this element called scripts, and I've got two scripts in here. I've got one called sniff and one called lint. Now, it becomes a trivial thing to run these scripts if I want, so for instance, the sniff script will run Code Sniffer with the PSR2 standard against all of the files in the .source directory. And right now in the .source directory, we've just got this library file, right? So if I run Composer sniff, it will run PHP Code Sniffer against the library file inside of my source directory. And as you can see, it found a bunch of errors because I'm a sloppy programmer. Shay would never let this pass muster, so I'm going to try to fix these errors before I pass it off to him. So instead of Composer sniff, I'm going to run Composer lint, which will use the code beautifier to fix these problems automatically. And now, if we go and look at our library file, you'll see that everything is much more nicely formatted using proper PHP PSR2 standards and that sort of thing. Of course, PSR2 is not the only standard that Code Sniffer can use. We've got a Drupal standard that we use for Drupal applications, and you can even write your own Code Sniff standards if that's what you'd like. Now, one of the things that Shay pointed out before is that you can use Composer to include things that are not PHP. So for instance, in my application here, I've got it called index.php. Right now we're just doing a command line version, but if for instance I wanted to do some jQuery stuff inside of a web page, I could include jQuery as a Composer package. And what that would do is it treats it exactly the same way. It goes out and it gets the files that you're needing, and it puts it into the vendor directory where you can then go and get at it. Now, as that's loading, I could, for instance, go into my PHP file here, and you know, this isn't going to work because this isn't an HTTP or a web page situation. But for instance, if it were, I could do something like that, and I could include the jQuery script, well, once it's loaded, right? So if I, no, it's still not there. So I have to give it a moment to finish. But rest assured, it will put jQuery into vendor components jQuery, and I can include it in my web pages as per standard operating procedure. Now, this, of course, begs the question of whether you should use Composer for JavaScript dependencies. And the answer to that, in my view, is generally no. If you're going to be managing JavaScript dependencies, you're probably better off using something like NPM. However, if you are just getting started with dependency management and you only want to stick with a single tool to work on your PHP web applications, Composer is absolutely capable of pulling in dependencies that are non-PHP. As long as there's a composer.json file in the package, Packagist can understand it and knows where to put it, and you can use it in your software. Okay, so we have done a little experimenting here, and we've got a little bit of code, so now is a good time to save our work. So I'll just say git add, and then add it to my repo, and then I will give it a little commit message. like so. Well,
got a question in the chat, Ian, asking you to talk a little bit more about the relationship and workflow between composer.json and composer.lock. And then also time check, we've got about 2.5 minutes left.
Okay, yes, no problem. So the composer.lock file is the file that Composer generates in order to keep a record of what is currently installed, what versions those are, and that sort of thing. It's actually a really good question because you might want to know whether or not you should include your composer.lock file in your repo. And the quick answer to that is that you should commit your composer.lock to your repo if it is a project, but you should git ignore the composer.lock file for libraries, right? Now, if you run composer install, Composer will use the composer.lock file to install the versions that are specified there. If you use composer update, then Composer will re-examine your composer.json file and will regenerate your composer.lock file. Now, there is a really great resource on exactly this question. One moment here. Oh gosh, where'd my chat window go? Okay, I will post this link in the chat momentarily. The idea is that you should never try to fix merge conflicts with your composer.lock file. What you should do is you should add a line in your Git attributes file in the root of your repo that says, hey, ignore composer.lock, and so Git won't try to do a merge there. It will, you know, if you've included it in a Git commit, then it will overwrite the version that is in the repo rather than trying to merge it. Does that answer your question?
Nick said yes.
Great, okay. Well, so that completes my demo. I'm gonna give the screen back to Shay. You guys can all find that code that we were just working with. You may have noticed I just committed that to GitHub and pushed it. That code is available at that URL there. And I will also include the link that I've got for information regarding the composer.lock file. Take it away, Shay.
Yeah, so 45 minutes is tight. Thank you for your patience. Just quick summary as a wrap up here. Composer, it handles dependency management as its primary function. It can allow you to separate dev from production libraries. It uses some semantic versioning and version constraints to handle the operations of what to pull and where to get it. It provides autoloading. It gives you trust in the stuff that you have. Like you can pull things in certain version ranges and you're good. It has script ability. You can add your own scripts. So if you don't want to remember things all the time, you can put in automation into that for you. Namespace is important, and use packages.org. Just a quick little takeaway too. Also, it takes time to learn new things. Definitely work at it. It's like the first time you had Git. It's going to be a little cumbersome at first. It might frustrate you. Things go wrong. Work at it, practice. And there's lots of support out there, so please reach out for help. Now, I know people want to have body breaks and go do things before the next sessions, but we do have a little bit of a window. I'm happy to stick around and answer questions if you want to. Ask away.
We've got a small enough group here. I think you can just unmute yourself and ask away. I don't see any hands raised in the virtual hands raised. So go ahead.
I'll raise a hand. So often what happens to me is I'll get, pretty far with Composer, like especially like with the Drupal update, I get like from 8.8 to, or 8.78 to 8.7. 11, and I'm all excited, and I think, okay, finally I got this. And then it comes to like, Drupal 8.8, and then everything kind of falls apart, and then I can, like restore the database, get everything back to 8.7, 11, by using composer.lock and this and that. And often what happens is there's kind of like weird stuff, that is nowhere when you look on Stack Overflow, where it says like, this doesn't, this is incompatible with your minimum stability requirement. Then I look all through that. Oh, there's nothing that says it has to be like this. And, and after a while, just seems like there's so many pieces that I kind of tend to give up. And so I'm just wondering, what is your advice for, debugging, when it gets crazy?
Troubleshooting issues. That's a good one. Ian?
Well, so Composer has some tools that you can use. Like, so for instance, we had a situation recently where we had a dependency that was causing us problems because there were some incompatibilities with one of the packages that we were using and another of the packages that we were using. And so when we tried to run a Composer update, it would give us a message that says, I can't find a compatible set of packages to install for you. Yeah. And the reason is because of this one package, and we look through the composer.json and we're not including it ourselves. Some other package is including it. So Composer has a tool called depends. It's another command that you can use, and you can use that to try to track down which package relies on the package that is causing you problems, and then sort of see if you can resolve it that way. In our case, we were using a dependency in the BLT software that was calling this package called Webflow. And when we tried to upgrade, the Webflow dependency was causing us all kinds of problems. And it turned out that there was a newer version of the dependency that we were relying on that did not include Webflow. So we upgraded that version, and that fixed the conflict. So there are tools that you can use that are built into Composer for troubleshooting some of these things, instead of just sort of manually going through the file and trying to figure out what it is. There is great documentation at getcomposer.org. It does take a little bit of time to get used to it and to understand where the tools live and what all is available to you. But I assure you that it is worth the trouble of learning it.
You said gethunter.org? What, or do you want
to? It was getcomposer.org. That's the.
Oh, okay. I've been to that one. Okay.
Yeah. When it's kind of frustrating when things go wrong. Sorry, just one last comment on that one. But that's actually a really good thing when Composer yells at you and something doesn't work or something's incompatible, because the alternative to that is broken software. Mm-hmm. So it is frustrating when things aren't aligning, and it can take a little bit of wrangling to figure out versions that are compatible. But at least it told you, and you've got a chance. You didn't have to discover it in a broken production build. Sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, so real quick for Ian, you mentioned earlier that, Shay's in the stability, which I support. I have to ask an upper hand question. Are you a stable guy, or do you live on the edge when it comes to a lot of this software when you use things?
Well, so if I'm working on, something as a personal project, then I tend to work more towards the edges of things, and I try to, I fly by the edge of my pants sometimes. But for work that I'm doing professionally, I always try to produce the most stable software with the least number of bugs as possible. And actually, it's a really good thing that the standards at Stanford Web Services are high, because it keeps me coding to a higher standard. So yeah, there's no worries with having anything too bleeding edge leaking into Stanford stuff.
Fair enough. Thanks.
That was a testing, and you passed. I'm not sure if you were looking at my and Shay's and Sarah's
jobs are done here
when that question was asked. Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Ian.
Good question.
Yeah, and we also have to live in the real world too. And like I said, if you work in Drupal and open source software, not everything is going to be unstable. We went down an exercise to see if we could get everything that our dependencies depended on onto stable releases and non-alphas or non-betas, and that was fruitless, to put it politely. So we do try to lock things as much as we possibly can so that we minimize the shift or possible churn that we could have in all our dependencies. But you have to live in the real world, and you have to let a few things go, I guess, at times. So you can do that. So we default to stable, and then we can add the at and then beta alpha flags or at dev flags where we need to allow for specific packages to be dev.
Thank you.
So there's a question about the workflow relationship between Git and Composer. That's a really great question. We did not have a chance to demo it today, but one of the nice things about Composer is that you can have it pull in stuff directly from GitHub, for instance, rather than going through Packagist. You can also pull in things from private repos and that sort of thing. Now, I very strongly advocate for using Git in any kind of development project that you are doing, especially if you are sharing your work with more than another person. That's just, good practice. If you are version controlling things with Git and you are managing your dependencies with Composer, then you will have a very nice log of where your dependencies changed and when, and hopefully why, if you have been commenting your stuff appropriately. So I think that those tools work really well together, and particularly the ability to pull in code via Composer from GitHub or from your own private repos is particularly nice.
Packaging and shipping your stuff is another 45-minute session in itself. So the general best practices, Nick, on that one is don't commit anything that Composer pulls down into your project. The idea is that you don't want to track any vendor code in your repository. You don't need that bloat when you're working on sharing on things. They can get a little bit tricky when you start talking about deployments and Drupal modules, for example. Like if you don't include the JavaScript library that it expects to live in a certain directory, and you ship that module, does that module get built out? Maybe not. So there's some workflow related things that can get challenging when we start talking about deployments and Drupal and artifacts. But generally, your best practices are to avoid committing anything that is vendor code, and that's everything that GitHub pulls down, or sorry, Composer pulls down.
Do we have any other questions, or shall we give everybody a 5-minute break before their next session to, take care of their human needs?
I'm gonna unmute everyone so we can give you all a round of applause. I think I unmuted everyone.
Thank you. That was really good.
Good job.
Thanks,
gentlemen.
guys.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Have a happy Saturday.
You too.